Welcome everybody to the Stoke Mandeville Plastic Surgery series endorsed by Plast UK and IcoPlast. It's been a couple of months since our last episode, so it's good to be back. My name is James Chan. And Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca Shirley. Hello.
Hello.
So I'm another plastic surgeon from Stoke Mandeville, and James Chan has started this series. We've got a very exciting episode tonight. Peter Abrahams is here to tell us lots of things about art, medicine, life, and it's going to be fun. Hopefully everybody's got their keys ready, and over to you, James.
Yeah, well, many of you will have learned from Peter's textbooks. He's an educator in every sense of the word. He has lectured all over the world. He is Life Fellow of Girton College in Cambridge, Professor Emeritus at Warwick Medical School, visiting professor at NTU Singapore. He's also been a GP for 45 years in the NHS. He's worked as anatomical consultant for the WHO and won numerous prizes for his works, including from the British Medical Association, the Royal Society of Medicine, the Royal College of Surgeons in Edinburgh, and also the American Association of Clinical Anatomists. But this is not all. He's also a renowned art historian. He's been consultant to the Buckingham Palace exhibition, Leonardo da Vinci Anatomist, and co-curator to the Mechanics of Man, Leonardo da Vinci exhibition in the Holyrood Palace for the Edinburgh Festival 2013. So I think today is going to be a really fun webinar. This is the first of a series of webinars that's aimed for people outside just the surgical community, and hopefully lots of students will from secondary schools and medical schools will be joining us from around the world tonight as well. So welcome everybody. Peter, over to you.
Right, well, the hand of God. I know that many of you will immediately recognize that as Maradona scoring a goal in the quarterfinals where Argentina beat England, and that is Peter Shilton and Maradona in the top right-hand corner there. In the middle, we have someone doing an amazing feat called Bruce Lee, who's doing a two-fingered press-up, and he could do that 200 times. Over here, we have some very interesting hands, which we'll talk about later, but this is Peter Norman, John Carlos, and Tommy Smith in the 1968 Olympics with the Black Power salute. And if any of you didn't know, this is the hand of Mrs. Röntgen. Now, we all know that X-rays on many parts of the world are called Röntgen. Now we have a problem. It's not responding to this. Have you switched something off, or have I switched something off? I've got a frozen screen and it isn't moving forward as it was before. That's great, isn't it?
Right, hang on.
I'm frozen completely and I'm not, wait, let me just try there and there again.
Yep, that's working.
No, that was working, yeah. So let me go back to that then and try again there. Maybe it's, so why shouldn't it be called Röntgen? Because in 1897, Röntgen produced his X-ray, for which he took an X-ray of his wife with the ring on her finger down here. And it's now known worldwide as Röntgenography, and Röntgen's name is attached to it. But in fact, the year before, Nikola Tesla, who is famous for the Tesla of the Californian car, and he produced this picture of the foot, X-ray of the foot, a year before Röntgen. So we really should call them Teslas and not Röntgen. But what about the hand? Man has the hand that makes him unique. And it's interesting that even 30,000 years ago, when man started doing paintings, one of the first things he did was he used to spit ochre over his hand and make an imprint of his hand, as seen in many, many caves all over the world. In fact, you can see one here, here's one in South America. And at the time that man started painting and had got interest in painting, these are the Chauvet caves in the Ardèche region of France, very well worth a visit if you're going down to Provence area. But the hand enabled man to do those paintings. The hand was one of the first things that man ever painted on his caves. Now, many of you are medical and are interested in anatomy, and I think it's important to realize that the first textbook of anatomy was this man, Vesalius's Fabrica, and he produced this in 1542 when he was only 28 years old, and he chose to show a picture of himself on the front cover and in his hand, the human hand that he has dissected. And we can see beautifully here the tendons, the long tendons of the hand, and he's pulled them out to show that there are two lots of long tendons. We'll be looking at that a bit later. So what I want to show you in this lecture is the interplay between art and science, between anthropology and anatomy, and how the hand has developed and how useful it is and why it's so useful. Now, many of us don't think about it. These beautiful pictures introducing the hand are in fact from an Italian, beautifully painted hands to show animals, but all of us actually can use our hands to speak with. This was in fact a stamp that came out for sign language. And what is fascinating that people like the Bushman in South Africa, here he is telling the story and signaling to his friends what he has seen, what animals are there. And the hand, of course, if you can't speak, is a very useful tool, and sign language is used worldwide by those that are deaf. What I've recently found out, though, which is fascinating, is that French Sign Language is not international. They use different signs than the English Sign Language, which is absolutely crazy. I don't know why, but that is true. Also, when I first started scuba diving, I realized that my children were able to sign underwater. And whereas I was stuck, unable to speak, which I like doing, you could actually sign to each other. And this sign, for instance, means beware in scuba diving internationally. It's the sign for danger. This is the sign for danger in scuba diving. So even underwater, one can speak if you've got your hands free. Obviously, if you've got a camera in your hand, it's quite difficult. So what is the special about the hand? Well, the hand has it on its skin, special histology. And that histology has a huge number of things called Pacinian and Meissner's corpuscles. And these corpuscles enable us to feel vibration, distortion, and discriminate touch. Now, if someone strokes the back of your neck or down your back, you barely feel it. If you get a single hair inside your mouth, you can remove it between your finger and your thumb, and you can actually feel that single hair in your hand. So the tips of the fingers, the pulps particularly of the hand, are extremely overburdened almost with extra corpuscles to feel things and be able to tell how things feel. So much so that in 1829, Monsieur Breuil made a complete language in little dots. And I think some of those of you that like your wine will be amused to see that you can even buy Chateauneuf where the label is written in Braille. So even if you can't see the bottle, you can feel which bottle you're going to buy. I think that's absolutely wonderful. Now, many of you will be sitting at a desk or sitting somewhere where you can go and get your keys. And what I want you to do is take a bunch of keys, put them behind your back. Normally I do this with 5 or 6 people in the front of the lecture theatre, but as we're all at home or in the office or wherever you are, and close your eyes or put the keys behind your back and feel what's on your bunch of keys. And I am quite sure that every one of you can identify which is the house door key, which is the car key, which is the padlock key, which is the bicycle lock key. In other words, you can distinguish very detailed things because of your finger and touch and proprioception. In other words, you can see with your hands. Now, when you say to people, let me see that thing, we actually mean, let me have it, let me feel it. And the feeling of the fingertips is in fact very much more advantageous in many ways than sight, because you can put your hand round a corner. When you drop something under the bed at night, like an earring or something, you can put your hand down without seeing anything and feel for the earring or the comb or the toothbrush or whatever is dropped on the floor. So one of the things you need to realize is that the hand is visual. It's a very important part of vision. And when we see, let me see that thing, we mean, can I feel that thing? And you can actually distinguish between different keys, between the things in the drawer. If I put my hand now, I'm sitting at a desk, put my hand into the drawer, I can distinguish which is a rubber, which is a ruler, which is a bottle, which is sellotape, and all those abilities are in the fingertips. Now, also, culturally, the hand is very important. Now, some of you that know me, or in fact, those of you who can see me now will probably not believe me, but that is me when I was working in Borneo in a hospital called Kapit in the interior of Borneo many, many moons ago. Black beard, black hair, as you can see, no longer black beard or black hair. But you will see the lady I'm examining is from the Kayan tribe, and you can see that the tattoos on her hands are very specific. And in many cultures, tattoos are used as a way of testing your caste or your position in society. They may be used for various different reasons. For instance, in Borneo, if you see men with tattoos across their knuckles, they're usually old men who did headhunting when the Japanese took over the island in the Second World War. I haven't got a picture of one of those, but I do have something that I will show you in a minute related to the tattoo. The same sort of thing with tattoos and the hand in the Hindi and the Eastern cultures, particularly Hindu cultures. At weddings, I often have patients who come into their surgery in Wembley with beautifully painted hands, and the hand is used as an art form. And this particular hand, in fact, hangs in my front door, and those of you that know me will probably recognize my old yellow Saab underneath, but this is a hamsa. And the hamsa within the Middle East culture and the Maghreb is the hand to ward off the evil eye. You can see the hand, and in the middle is an eye, and you will often see women with jewelry, with this lovely pendant. This is in fact being made in glass. But not all things are in foreign cultures. In fact, the hand is often a place of tattooing, and a particularly well-known tattoo is the love and hate. In fact, this originally came from the Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum in the 50s, and he was a preacher, and on his right hand was love, and on his left hand was hate. And you often see that often in people who've been in Her Majesty's pleasure, but it is a common tattoo that says something about people. One shouldn't say that it always is, but often I have noted that people that have that tattoo on their hands are people who have been a little bit wayward in their life. But also the hand has had more cultural significance, and of course, Black Lives Matter has brought it back in the last year, but this was the most famous beginning of the Black Power salute. And the three people there were the three people you saw on the first slide were Peter Norman, Tommy Smith, and John Carlos, who were the 200-meter runners at the Olympics in 1968. And they did something which no one had ever really done at the Olympics. They protested silently, no violence, no nastiness. They just stood there, they took their medals, and they put their hands up in the Black Power salute of the 1960s. In fact, the black gloves they are wearing belong to Peter Norman. If you look carefully, they've got a right and a left glove. And Peter Norman, the Australian runner who got the silver medal, actually gave them those hands, and he is wearing here a protest of peace movement, and he got into a lot of trouble when he went back to Australia. And here again is the Black Power salute by a black artist, carved in wood, and a beautiful carving here, Black Unity in mahogany wood, done in 1968. So the hand became a cultural symbol of the Black Power movement. But hands have always been around, and the laying on of hands has been something associated with medicine. And I've chosen here 3 different centuries, 3 different cultures: America, Spain, and India, Ayurvedic medicine. But the laying on of hands, that the doctor holding the hands of the patient, has always been a very important, essential part of medicine. And I must say, I know many of my colleagues at the moment who are not able to actually touch their patients, don't see their patients in physical contact. are finding that aspect of medicine very difficult at the moment with COVID. So what about the sort of history of the hand and the art of the hand and the anatomy of the hand? Well, these are pictures from the Royal Collection, and these were done by Leonardo da Vinci. So on the left, on the left here, we have Leonardo's 3 pictures of the hand, and you will see I put an arrow at the top and it says feel. What I want you all to do is to feel this little bone, which is at the bottom of the little finger on the palm of your hand. Go down the little finger across the palm to this point. I don't know if you can all see, I'm pointing to it on my screen. Not the thumb side, the little finger side. You can all feel that little bone, and that little bone is the pisiform bone. And what's special about it, and Leonardo noted it in his writing here, up here where the red arrow is, he said, this is a special bone. It is a sesamoid bone, and it has a special function as a mechanical advantage for the tendon that is going through it. In other words, that bone is within a tendon. The other bones here of the carpal bones are all actually quite solid together. They're attached by lots of different ligaments. This one is a sesamoid bone, a little seed-like bone that lies within the tendon of the flexor carpi ulnaris. A lovely example, first described in 1509 by Leonardo da Vinci, who did these drawings on the left. And this was his second page on the hand. And what he did, and many of you may not know, but this page, and this is the actual size, and I've enlarged over here on the right-hand side, he actually did 10 drawings of the hand on one A4 piece of paper. And if you look very carefully where the blue arrow is, you can see that one tendon is split by the other tendon. He was the first person ever to describe that and draw it. These were done in the 1490s, 1500 period, right at the very, very beginning of the 16th century. And these were the most accurate drawings of the hand and its musculature that had ever been done. And actually, they're still accurate. And if you look at this little bit that I've squared in yellow, you will see even he mentions the pulley systems, which are the sort of things that you as plastic surgeons need to know, because you won't be able to repair a finger properly if the pulley systems aren't all working. And you can see here are the little pulleys, little fibrous tissue that are holding the tendons in this rock climber. Same here, the same sort of thing. To hold in that position, you require the little pulleys. And Leonardo da Vinci not only got the muscles and the tendons of the hand correct, he even got the pulleys correctly placed. Nowadays, we can make a similar sort of here we are, thing in graphics, and you can see there the little muscles, there's the long tendons, there's the thenar and hypothenar eminences, and we can turn that all the way around and look. But that design of the hand was exactly what Leonardo did 500 years ago. It took another 500 years to get to the stage I'm just showing you there. Now, Leonardo wasn't the only one who was good at hands. And I think if you look at 2 of the most famous sculptures by Michelangelo, but don't worry about the beauty of the actual sculptures, though they are phenomenal, and the very interesting horns on Moses's head, which were because of a translation mixture from the Latin and the Hebrew. They actually are like shafts of light, but he actually translated them in the other word to call them horns, and specifically did that. But look at the hand. Look at the beauty of both the tendons, the knuckles, the dorsal venous arch are absolutely magnificent. And you look here at Michelangelo's David in 1505, and here you have the most wonderful dorsal venous arch. There is the basilic, and here is the cephalic vein where you would put your drips in, beautifully illustrated. Some of you may ask, why were the hands in the Michelangelo's David too big? And the answer is they weren't too big for where they were going to be displayed. because they were going to be displayed on high up on a building in the piazza. And in the end, they brought it down. And many of you will have seen it in the Accademia, where the hands look a bit too big. In fact, from the point of view of perspective, he got it absolutely right. Now, another of the Renaissance artists who was really good at anatomy was Albrecht Dürer. He was mad on proportions. As you can see from the little drawing here, even the hands he wanted to proportion, tenths and eighths and sixths and everything. But look how magnificently he actually drew his hands. The praying hand, and again, you can see the tendon, you can see the venous arches, you can see the nail bed and the knuckles and the skin loose over the knuckles, because these guys were really wonderful artists. And you can see the slight shadow there of the extensor carpi tendon, giving a little swelling under the skin. This is a painting of Albrecht Dürer himself, a self-portrait. And here is something that he did when he was only about 20 years old, showing the hand in opposition. Sorry, let me just go back. I'm getting all sorts of messages coming up on my screen, which I don't seem to be able to get rid of. I don't know if you can help on that, James, but don't worry, there are people writing things in and raising their hand. Can we save those till the end, please, if we can?
Okay.
I don't know, they're coming on the screen, which is a nuisance, but it doesn't matter. And here we have Albrecht Dürer showing the position of opposition, which is where we put the pulp of the thumb to the pulp of the finger, something which is very specific to humans. And I'll mention that a bit more further along. I wonder how many people can now type in, and what muscle is this that he's showing bulging there? If you want to, write in and tell me what is that muscle that's bulging in the first web, because he accurately drew it. And you can see he did a lot of drawings on the percentage of fingers to knuckles to metacarpals. He was really interested in proportion of the body. What about getting a grip? I love that elephant, isn't he gorgeous? Well, the grip can be multi-different types. And I would recommend Aiello and Dean's book, if any of you are interested in anthropology and grips of different apes and everything, because there is a wonderful book. And you can see we have all sorts of grips that all of you would recognize. But the one I particularly want you to notice, or the two, are the pad to pad grip and the pad to side grip. Because this, which we call opposition, is specifically human. This, many of the apes can do as well as we can, but they can't get round the corner. And that's why they haven't developed quite as well at doing things like playing the violin and the computer and doing sewing and things like that. Because having pulp to pulp opposition, which is known as pad to pad or pulp to pulp grip, is a particularly human aspect that makes it very useful for doing manipulation of tools and of implements. Now here is the movement of ab and adduction of the palmar interossei. Now the reason I want you to see this is most of you will probably, the medics certainly will know, there are lots of little muscles in the hand that lie where your palm is. So this area is the palm here, there's the palm. And there are palmar interossei, that means on the palm side, on the front side, if you like, this side. And there are dorsal interossei, which lie on the back side, which I'm showing you now. And one way that we always remember is pad and dab, the palmar adduct and the dorsal abduct. And what do they go from and to? The answer is the middle finger, where I put a big red star. So there we have the middle finger virtually doesn't move. The palmar interossei take the fingers towards the middle finger. The dorsal interossei take them away from the middle finger. So pad and dab is a very easy way to remember the movements of the interossei, all of which, by the way, are ulnar nerve innervated. So what about the intrinsic hand muscles? These are the little muscles in the hand which most of us find very difficult to comprehend and see because they're difficult to dissect. So I did one very beautiful dorsal expansion dissection. So this is the back of the finger. This is the dorsal hood here, and you will see there is a lumbrical, an interosseous, an interosseous, and a lumbrical, all going into the dorsal expansion. Now, that means that it enables the fingers to be held in this sort of position, with a flexed metacarpophalangeal joint and extended fingers, extended interphalangeal joint, which is very necessary if you're someone like this rock climber on the left. But what I want you to note is that rock climbing uses the interossei. Look at the size of those interossei. They're chunky. And look at the size of lumbricals. They're pathetic. They're a tenth the size of the interossei. So all of the intrinsic muscles of the hand help the hand in grips. But the thing you should remember is you need, for your rock climbing, the interossei to hold you like that. But when you're doing delicate movements like this sort of movement with your fingers, when you're doing the upstroke of writing and you're doing delicate writing, you use the lumbricals. So the lumbricals are for writing, the interossei are for hanging off a cliff for rock climbers, although all of the muscles go into the dorsal hood and therefore extend the finger down this end. The lumbricals are very special. And if you didn't know it already, you should know the lumbricals are a unique arrangement. They're unique because they come from a tendon and they go into a tendon. In other words, they don't have any attachment, in some ways a bit like the facial musculature, but they don't have any solid attachment. And that's why they're very good for very small movements, very delicate movements. But they come from the tendons of flexor digitorum longus and go round the fingers and insert, as I show you here, into the dorsal expansion. That is a picture worth remembering if you're a medic to understand the interossei and the lumbricals. Well, what about the origin of the hand? Well, I thank Marios Lucas, one of my co-authors, who was president of the American Association of Clinical Anatomists until just recently. And as you can see, there isn't that much difference between Marios, one of my good friends, and Charlie the chimp. But look at the difference in the feet, toes. Look at the difference in the hand and where the thumb is. And of course, chimps tend to have more hair than humans, though some of you that know me well will know that I'm about as hairy as the old chimp. But notice the position of the thumb on the chimp, Charlie the chimp. So the apes have got a short thumb, and they can do pulp to pulp, but they can't do pulp to pulp opposition. They can do pulp to side. They're very good at gripping. In fact, their grip is better than ours because they can wind their fingers tightly round things more so than we can. They can get a double lock, particularly if you're a gibbon with a longer fingers, we'll see in a minute. But here you can see that the little thumb can only do side to pulp opposition, which is quite useful, but it's not as good as this, which is pulp to pulp opposition in the human. And as I think it's rather nice that in Sarawak, they actually have the orangutan looking exactly like this little fellow on their stamps. So if we look at the different hands, I think this is a very good illustration. The gibbon that flies through the trees and can really grip the trees and literally fly has got a very long thumb, but the thumb is very far down. It can't reach the fingers very easily. As we come up, orang, chimpanzee, gorilla, and then human, you can see how the thumb is getting nearer to the fingers, and therefore you can do better opposition, and you can do pulp to pulp opposition in the human hand, which really has given us a great advantage over the years. Scotland Yard, another thing about the hand that's important. There is a whole, those of you that live in England will know that Scotland Yard is the head of the police station. In fact, I remember that in the 1962 Dr. No film, the James Bond film, they actually had someone opening a door with their fingerprint. How ridiculous, I thought. And yet I bet half of you that are sitting here tonight have telephones that you open with your finger or your thumbprint. In fact, I was recently coming back from Singapore, and to get out of Singapore, all you have to do is look in a camera and put your thumbprint over the machine, and it recognizes your face and your thumbprint, and it will then let you out of the country. What an amazing development. And here, courtesy of one of my good friends, Christine, are the dermal ridges with the sweat coming out between those dermal ridges that make up your fingerprints, seen on a scanning EM. And you can see the ridges have very interesting arrangements, all different arrangements. And as you know, all of us, we have unique fingerprints. How does the hand develop? Well, if you look at pictures starting here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can see the development of the hand. Basically, it is a bit of tissue like a paddle that comes out, and then slowly these bits of tissue die away, and we're left with the tissue in between, which become the fingers. And the research on that, there's some wonderful, if any of you are interested or doing hand surgery, look up Louis Wolpert and the French flag positioning papers in the Journal of Theoretical Biology in 1969, where he wrote about digital signaling and the French flag, where one cell can tell when it's next to another cell that's secreting certain hormones, that actually it needs to die off and let the hand develop with little fingers like that. So it's a marvel of beautiful genetics and embryology in one. Look up Louis Wolpert. He used to work at the Middlesex Hospital. He's now an elderly retired professor, but well worth reading his papers on hand development. And of course, if it goes wrong, you may end up with no division between those two fingers, or you may end up with an extra finger, like in here and here. And in fact, syndactyly, where the hands are locked together, if you like, in a sort of lobster type hand, are not that rare, and that's when the signaling in the embryology of the hand goes wrong. So to sum up at the end, I want to now test some of your knowledge. So I think it's best if you write these in. I will go through them with you, and then quickly at the end, maybe we'll go over them, or maybe I'll go through them if you can write in as you think you've got the answer. This is a true, all of these are true cases. I've not manufactured any of these for this. I had a lovely Caribbean lady of about 70. She's a little farmer, in fact, in Grenada. And she came to see me whilst visiting her sister in Wembley, complaining that she was turning yellow and she felt very tired. On examination, I couldn't find anything. I examined her abdomen properly. So I sent off bloods expecting to find that she had liver function tests, possibly due to secondaries. She was an elderly lady, she didn't look that well, and she looked very yellow. So later, I took a photograph of her palms, which are these two at the sides, and her sister, who she'd come to visit in Wembley, which was the normal. So here's the normal lady, and here is the lady that I'm talking about. Any ideas for a diagnosis? Would you like to type in what you think this is? I will wait for a minute. Is anything coming in, James?
Having a look now. Not yet, people are thinking.
All right. I will tell you all now that her liver function tests were all normal, to my great surprise.
Okay, we've got carotemia, renal disease.
Very good. Both of those are good answers. The carotemia is the nearest, but it isn't carotemia. What do you think it is in the Caribbean?
There's anemia and Gilbert's disease, hypothyroid.
Good. They're all reasonable answers. The carotemia deserves a pat on the back, but it isn't quite right. The next question I asked her, what did she farm? And she's from the Caribbean. What do people farm in the Caribbean that causes this problem?
Guava.
Good answer, but it wasn't guava.
That was Mark. Ochre poisoning. Papaya.
No, it's not ochre. It's simpler than that, and I will now tell you all. It's pumpkinemia. This lady had pumpkins for breakfast, pumpkins for lunch, and pumpkins for tea. She grew all her own pumpkins, as many people do in the Caribbean, and she lived on pumpkins. And thank heavens, her LFTs were normal. She didn't have liver disease. I told her to cut down on her pumpkins, and she went home a happy lady. Okay, spot diagnosis, come on. Any medical students around should be able to get that one straight away. Tell me, James, when you've got some in that you think are right.
Okay, first one from Monica. Marfans.
Wrong. Marfans have got
Acromegaly.
longer hands, by the way. They've got longer hands.
Acromegaly from John Curtis.
Very well done, John Curtis. It's a classical case of acromegaly. Look at the hands, look at the jaw. The face is fairly thick set, but the hands are very huge. And in fact, the patient did come with a problem with hands, saying that his hands just seemed to be getting bigger and he couldn't understand why. Next one. This one people should need to think about. This is a patient of mine. Look at his two hands. He had an injury as a 4-year-old with a fracture. Observing his hand, what was damaged in the fracture when he was 4? Look at his hand.
Coming in, Mohsin and Deborah Fong both saying ulnar nerve injury.
Very good, full marks. And the thinking is this, and this is what you need to look at. Obviously, there's something looks a bit soggy there. When you look at the size of the hand, the physical size of the hand is small, but the thumb is normal, and the thumb and the thenar eminence look about the normal size compared to the other hand. But the whole of the palm has never developed properly because the ulnar nerve was damaged, so he hasn't got very good interossei. And if you look carefully, he's got a little bit of clawing of his little finger. That is absolutely right. He had an ulnar nerve damage as a child, and the hand never developed. He was 82 when this picture was taken. Okay, the left hand is trying to copy the right hand. What is the injury and what are the likely causes of this disability? So I've got 4 pictures. The right hand is making a fist and the left hand can't. The right hand is holding in that position and the left hand can't. The right hand is splayed out, fully extended. The left hand can't. Here's doing opposition, finding it very difficult to get the proper opposition.
Okay, John Curtis again, Erb's palsy.
No, a good guess, a good suggestion, not a guess. A good suggestion. It's not an Erb's palsy.
Oh, Samuel George, Klumpke, simian hand.
No.
AIN.
Sorry?
Anterior interosseous nerve.
Getting sort of closer, but not. Notice that this hand is in a flex position. That might help you. Notice even in this position, it's in a sort of flex position. Notice they're having to hold the hand to get into this position. Notice they're using another hand to get into this position. What can't they do? They can't extend. What?
So
Go
I've got
on.
a few more. So Rebecca Pratt, radial nerve palsy.
Full marks, Rebecca. Is that? Oh, that's wonderful. Rebecca Pratt from Michigan, I presume, or from California. I'm not sure where Rebecca is. She's an anatomist. Well done, Rebecca. So what might the causes be? Well, there are many causes, but certainly a fracture of the humerus is a possibility. But here is the radial nerve going around the back, the posterior view of the arm. Here is the triceps. Here's the spiral groove and the radial nerve. What I like is the French have got a lovely name for it, la paralysie des amoureux. So when you fall asleep with your loved one, with your arm stuck around your loved one, the weight of your loved one crushes your radial nerve and you wake up with a paralysis of lovers. In English, we often refer to it as Saturday night palsy or Saturn palsy, which was an interesting paper, in fact, by, I've forgotten his name, at the Mayo Clinic. Okay, next one, diagnosis. Come on, there's some students there that should be able to put that one in straight away.
John Curtis, on again, Jupitrons.
Very good. Jupitrons, normally it's ring and or little finger. It's often ring finger first and then little finger. And that often involves cutting of the fibrous tissue that has caused the Jupitrons. Tends to be associated with liver disease. It's genetically, tends to be more in men than women. And certainly alcohol has something to do with it in some people, but it doesn't mean you're an alcoholic. Okay, look at this hand number 6. The black arrow is illustrating something going on here. And then I want you to look at number 18, which is a little tiny structure coming up here, up here, up here, onto the thenar eminence. Why is number 18 important in making the correct diagnosis for what's going on here? Anyone write in?
Okay, Luana, sensory branch of the median nerve, he says.
Full marks for number 18. It's the part, we call it, I agree, it's a sensory branch, and that's the whole point. It's the palmocutaneous branch of the median nerve. And the reason it's important is if the patient has lost the muscles here, which is the thenar eminence muscles, the commonest cause of that is in fact carpal tunnel syndrome. So if they have got a carpal tunnel syndrome, this will not be involved. So the sensation in that area should be normal. If they've lost the sensation as well as the muscles in that area, the injury is further down the arm and you need to investigate the elbow or even higher up. It could be anywhere up, higher up on the median nerve before the carpal tunnel. Good. What connects these 3 patients, and think of 3 likely different pathologies? So one thing connects all 3, but what are the likely 3 different pathologies?
So Samir Gujral, he says nerve injury.
Which nerve?
Ulnar nerve from Rebecca Pratt and Marie.
Good. Rebecca's obviously well awake in early morning in America. Well done. It's an ulnar nerve policy problem, but what do you think the pathology might be in the 3 different cases? Well, this one is almost certainly traumatic. There's the cut. Observation. Would someone like to write in what is the problem here? Look carefully.
So we've got a couple of answers. One from Samuel George, leprosy.
Full marks, absolutely full marks. Well done. It's not a disease that most of you will see, though those of you that live in places like Ethiopia and parts of Africa and possibly even some parts of the Middle East, you may see elderly patients with leprosy. It's not a common disease, certainly in England. I've only ever seen 1 leprosy case in England. Of course, it wasn't in an English person, it was in a new immigrant.
A lot of people thought that was scleroderma. A lot of people thought that was scleroderma.
It looks sclerodermic, absolutely. And I would agree, in England, a hand looking like that is more likely to be scleroderma, but this was actually leprosy. E.T. has got a raised hand in Singapore. Can you see something coming in? Can he write in, E.T.?
Yeah. Not recently, no.
Okay. So what's this 3rd one likely to be when it's the ulnar nerve that's been damaged? Look at that, look at that. Well, it doesn't matter what the condition is, it's going to be some serious neurological condition which has knocked out probably all the intrinsic muscles with guttering, something like multiple sclerosis or motor neurone disease. Okay, let's look at this next case. This is a medical student. I've had problems playing my violin. Number 1 is a scar for an operation. The yellow arrow is pointing to a hollow. So there's the scar, there's the hollow, and the red arrow is pointing to the wasted first web muscle.
We've got an answer from Samuel George, Charcot-Marie tooth.
A good answer. It wasn't. It's actually more simple and something that.
Oh, we've got
any others?
Cervical rib from a couple of people.
Full marks. Whoever got that, full mark. She's had an operation on her cervical rib. In fact, they couldn't get at the first rib, so they took out the second rib to try and relieve the pressure. And in fact, the hollow is where there is no second rib. And the reason that she's got wasting there is that T1 is the clue. Her T1 was being irritated by her cervical rib. Now, that is not such a rare disease. I don't know, James, can I ask you, do you as a hand surgeon do cervical ribs?
No.
So it's done by the thoracics, is it?
No, it depends where you go, but I'm just not in the centre that does it. I don't think I'm not. Yeah, so not all centres do this. Yeah.
But beware of that, that even if you operate on the patient, they may not get the muscular back if the T1 nerve root has been crushed or been, you know, badly damaged. Okay, spot diagnosis. Which bone has been fractured and what's the condition? Horrible condition. Usually happens to children who are stealing apples in England or mangoes in the Caribbean.
Oh, okay, so John Curtis, again, supracondylar fracture of the humerus.
Full marks. And what's the condition?
So two other answers, one from Monica, wrist drop, the other one, Volkmann's.
The Volkmann's is the correct answer. Yes, they do have a wrist drop, but it's actually, if you see how distorted the first hand is, it's Volkmann's ischemic contracture. And the person who said supracondylar fracture is absolutely right. But what is the mechanism is go and look at your anatomy of where the median nerve and the brachial artery lie just above the elbow. If you have a supracondylar fracture, you must check the brachial artery and test the nerve, because it's the artery in this case that's often the worst problem. If you lose the arterial supply to the whole of the arm below the elbow, that is what you get. You get horrible contractures called Volkmann's ischemic contracture. So to sort of summarize, this is a wonderful painting that many of you know, but actually the anatomy of the flexor muscles is wrong. And if you look carefully, you will see that here, the flexor long tendons are coming off the lateral side of the arm. And we think that actually Dr. Tulp didn't make a mistake. We think Rembrandt did it on purpose so that people would discuss it years later. And in fact, there is a whole textbook written on that. And I thought that might interest you, that a wonderful piece of art there, it's actually anatomically wrong. And one of my friends very kindly said, here's the anatomy lesson of Dr. Abrahams with the modern technology. Art of the hand can also be anatomical fun, with apologies to Michelangelo, and I'm sure you all recognize David with a little change. And those of you that are really interested in learning more about the hand, there are 3 or 4 wonderful books that really, if you're a hand surgeon or involved in hand surgery, you jolly well should read, particularly Napier and Wood-Jones. All right. The Leonardo book, any of you can buy on Amazon. I'm not trying to sell it, but it's a wonderful book of the anatomy of Leonardo. And the last one is a paper that is very interested on the anthropology of the hand, a fairly recent paper on the early evolution of the manipulation of the hand, if you're interested in anthropology. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer any question, James, if people want to send them in.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That was really fun and really informative. Rebecca.
Thank you. So very much enjoyed your talk and particularly interested in the link between art and medicine. So I just wondered if you'd come across a school of American hand surgeons that believe that Jesus in the Last Supper painting had a syndactyly, and what your views on that were. Is that something you've ever discussed or been?
No, last year I went and saw the actual painting of the Last Supper. I don't think he has got syndactyly personally, and I'm not going to get into arguments with anyone. I think it's just the way he painted it. And there's no reason that he would suddenly, Leonardo knew his anatomy backwards. Leonardo knew anatomy better than anyone for about 300 years, in my own estimation. The fact that he never published a book is the crime of science and medicine. But in reality, he knew his anatomy of the hand better than anyone. Gus McCrowther and I, and you may know Gus McCrowther, who's professor of hand surgery in Singapore, spent a whole day looking at Leonardo's original drawings in Windsor Castle, and we couldn't find a serious mistake in them. So I don't think Leonardo would have bothered doing something as silly as that. I think it's a good painting, and I just think it's got smudged by the restorers. I'll now get 100 emails next week from that group of people.
So yeah, interestingly, it was Professor McGrowther that first introduced me to plastic surgery, because I cut a digital nerve as a medical student. And yeah, so very, very nice.
Plastic surgeon, I'm amazed.
Yes, I didn't realise plastic surgery was a real thing until I met him. So yeah.
Well, he's alive and well and working in Singapore, having retired from Manchester.
Fantastic. So I've got another question, which is from friend and colleague Jeremy Rodriguez, who works as another consultant with myself and James. Right. He wanted to know whether you thought that Caravaggio's favourite model was so because she had a proximal phalanx malunion, which is very challenging to paint, or whether it was related to her job as a prostitute.
Well, knowing Caravaggio, he probably beat her up or something. He was a bit of a naughty boy. I don't know I haven't looked at the hands of Caravaggio. I've seen many Caravaggios and actually spent one trip in Rome going around all the Caravaggios, but I don't know the actual one you're talking about. But knowing what a tough life both prostitutes and Caravaggio had in Rome, it wouldn't surprise me if it was a traumatic injury, not in the least.
I had a question for you.
Can I ask you? I would like to ask you a question just about how your interest in hands and anatomy came about. Where did that appear from?
I don't have a particular interest in hands. I teach the whole of anatomy of the whole body. And once, in fact, no, Gus actually, about 3 years ago, Gus asked me to give a lecture to the Hand Society of Singapore, and not this particular lecture, but many of the basics of this lecture were made for a lecture in Singapore, and it was very interesting. At 7 o'clock in the morning, 200 orthopedic and hand surgeons turned up. I don't think anywhere in London you could get 200 surgeons to turn up at 7 o'clock in the morning for a lecture, and got noodles for breakfast. Now, I haven't got a particular interest in the hand. I just thought it's an interesting topic because it interests people across art, science, anthropology, forensics. I mean, it has so many interesting things. And I just thought The Hand of God sounds like a nice title because of the Maradona link. And I just put together this lecture. But actually next week I'm lecturing 8 hours for oral surgeons. No, I don't have a particular interest in that. Just anatomy. Okay, so we have a comment from Rebecca Pratt, who says, I will never look at the lesson by Dr. Tulp the same. Thank you in capitals for this talk. A question from William Lowe, who was also a medical student at Cambridge and now a neurosurgeon up in Birmingham. He asks, why do humans have handedness? Ah, very good. Why, I don't know. There is a fabulous penguin or pelican book on handedness. I've read it and I can't remember who the author. It was about 10 years ago I read it. There is a book on, I'm just trying to think, I know the author. We don't know. The genetics, of course, of left-handedness is well researched, and people are thought who are left-handed possibly to have some minimal brain damage. That's one of the suggestions. As I have a wife who's left-handed, I have to be careful what I say. Okay. We have a question. But there is a textbook on left-handed, on handedness, and it's a penguin or a pelican. Okay. There's the left-handed woman on in Penguin, Modern Classics. No, it's or if I can remember, I'll send you the reference. I just can't think of it at the moment. All right, so I've got a few more questions from the audience.
One is from Sam Goodrow. Given the technology we all embrace these days, for example, mobile phones and touch screens, do you feel our hands will change in time? And if so, how? Thank you for a fantastic lecture.
That's a very interesting question. I don't know if they will, but in theory, they might. Because if you look at a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old with an iPhone, they all tend to double thumb type. Now, I'm much too old to do that. I use one index finger and I type with one index finger. If I look at my grandchildren, they don't even have to look at the phone. They actually double type with their fingers like this on the phone, and they can type 10 to the dozen. And I wonder if, in fact, over generations, we might get some changes in certain joints, and it might become selective for the speed at which you type. Maybe a certain shape of the scaphoid might make it easier to type or whatever. I think it's unlikely, but it's not inconceivable.
Great. Jay was asking whether the book you were referring to was right hand, left hand.
It might be. It might be.
And
what was the name of the author? Do they say the author?
No. You can have
this
a look.
person has written on right and left and the whole body. In fact, I came across it looking at the left and right testis.
Okay.
Because the left and right testis are at different heights, and why? And that's how I got into found this book of the papers published by this person on left and right hands. And I don't think it's that book. I will try and look it up.
Okay, and final comment from Chris Stafford. Dogs also have a favorite side. I'm a vet.
Dogs always have a favorite side.
As do leopards.
As do
leopards. Female leopards always kill with their left paw, left front. If
fascinating.
He'll correct me on terminology.
Fascinating. Yeah. Very interesting. But you know, the hand has definitely put us where we are as humans.
Thank you very much indeed. We're going to have to round this session up now, but it's been a fantastic evening. I've enjoyed it very much, and I'm sure our audience too. So thank you everyone for joining us from around the world. And this will be made available online. Many thanks, Peter Abrahams. Fantastic talk.
It was a great pleasure. And thank you, Rebecca, who I know very well, is somewhere in America. Cheers, everyone.
Take care. Have a good night.